Good afternoon. Welcome back to the fifth Home Games webinar. It's lovely to see so many of you on. I'm stunned and appalled and humbled and many other adjectives that so many of you take a little bit of time out of your week to come and do this kind of stuff. Someone was asking the other day, how did you get to do these? They seem to have become a bit of a thing, and the answer was only that we were hacked off, that we couldn't run our Scottish event, so we decided to do something just to see how it goes, and here we all are. So you are all extremely welcome to this session. For any first timers among you, same format as we've done the last couple of weeks. Our main session lasts half an hour, and we're going to cover a couple of different things. I'll come on the agenda in a wee sec. I am joined in a tiny little screen at the bottom of your screen at the moment by Chris Fisher from Multrees. Multrees are a really interesting company that have a strong history in dealing with family offices and wealth managers, technology provider to those kind of guys, and a platform of sorts. And we're going to get into some of the digital business stuff with Chris, and some of the differences between that end of the market using the sort of stuff that they do, and some lessons maybe for the IFA market as well, which I think will be pretty interesting. So we do all that in half an hour, and then at the end, if you want to stay on, we do what we now call the after party, where you can chat away in the right hand bit, we'll do our best. Chris is going to stay on for that as well, and we'll do our best to keep the chat going, and a bit of silliness and devilment and naughtiness and all that kind of stuff. If you want to ask questions, there's an ask a question bit at the bottom. If you just want to stick stuff in chat in the right, I'm looking at it. Thank you, Mr. John Taylor. Don't let it go to your head, Mark. We're only here for the guests. Me too, mate. Me too. That's why I'm here. But we both know it's not true. You're actually here for the joke, which is a good one this week, which actually, it doesn't have any animals in it, and it does have arithmetic in it, and all the best jokes have arithmetic in it. And Kate says, you realise this has become the highlight of many of our weeks, don't you? And if there was ever a sad reflection on what lockdown is doing to this industry, that must surely be it. T-shirt of the week is, listen, I got such a strong response last week after Sabbath's T-shirt. So many of you saying, Mark, we hadn't fully explored 1980s pagan thrash to the extent that we should have, and so I thought we'd follow on that theme. And this is from Skyclad, of course, which was Martin Volkier's band after he left Sabbath, at which point they went downhill pretty fast. Skyclad, a brilliant kind of pagan folk thrash band. Slightly patchy output, but good records like Prince of the Poverty Line and The Wayward Sons of Mother Earth, definitely worth checking out. Unfortunately, they'll probably always be best known for a spirited cover version of Tenpole Tudor's Swords of a Thousand Men, with Tura Lurayes and all the rest of it in it. But you probably shouldn't go there first, because that's a kind of specialist taste. So that's T-shirt of the week. So listen, let's get into the agenda. I'll do the thing where I share me. Do the sharey screen thing. Hang on, what do I have to do? I have to do this, and then this. You think I'd be good at this by now, but I'm not, and you're not here for professionalism, so whatever. And I'll focus in on that one, and here we go. Right, so let's have a look at what we're going to cover. Each week I share a little bit of research that the Landcat's done. And this week, I'm going to talk about sources of new business. The idea, again, for those of you that maybe haven't been with us before, is that we're going to talk about stuff that we might talk about if COVID-19 and all that wasn't happening, right? Because there's lots of other people doing really, really good stuff on that. And Chris was telling me that he has forsaken a Joe Cumbo webinar on pensions in the age of cholera or something with the FT to be here, which is big of him. So you can go and do those kinds of things, but we're going to stick to stuff that we might ordinarily talk about and try and pretend that none of this is happening. So we're going to talk about new business acquisition and barriers to new business. Then we'll get into the stuff that we're going to do with Chris. Then you get a joke, and then we are out of it. So let's dive into some of the new business stuff. I'm hoping that everybody can see the thing. I think you can. Oh my God, my husband loves Tenpole Tudor, says Kate. I mean, we need to talk, Kate. I think that's there are courts for that sort of thing. The family courts will generally have some stuff to say about that. So I saw a really interesting bit in Money Marketing yesterday. Justin Cash had done it, and it was a survey from somebody that said that IFAs were overwhelmingly rejecting using video stuff, that they were terrified of even picking up the phone or something, and the new business was off a cliff, and that everything was very, 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 very dark indeed. I thought it was kind of weird. I didn't really recognize that, and I was doing a webinar yesterday with Rohan Sivajoti from NextGen and Postcard Planning and some of the Aviva guys, and he was saying that he thought stuff had gone off a cliff for like a week or 2 weeks. NMG, Mark, thank you very much. But after that, it was stuff had basically come back to normal, and he runs quite an online-y kind of business anyway. But he was saying, no, it's, definitely felt it for a couple of weeks, but things were largely back to the other stuff. Fee's saying she doesn't recognize that either, and that's kind of good to hear. So I wonder, I mean, there's definitely doom and gloom around, right? It's not a great time to be running a pub. But and actually for our business, we definitely felt some impacts, and things are kind of following that. They're starting to come back around again now. So it'll be kind of interesting to talk about. So I'm going to talk a little bit just about if we imagine, because the survey that I'm going to share with you was done before all of this, right? So if we imagine none of the last few weeks had happened, what's going on? But before I do, there's something that I forgot to do again, and I'm going to ask you to help me out. And it's here. We are asking everyone that uses a platform, so whether you're a power planner, an advisor, an admin, whatever you are, not if you work for the platforms, obviously, to let us know how they're doing. So there's a link on the screen. If that's too much to remember, there's a little green button down below your video saying please rate your platform. It takes about 4 minutes, and we're specifically looking for how platforms are doing as we go through these uncertain times and blah, 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 blah. So if you did spend time doing it after last week, lots of people did actually, thank you so much. And if you didn't, then you have a chance to put that right after this one. Are we in our digital echo chamber? Says Sarah and John, who used to work together and appear to be, you guys, I can probably set up a private session or something if you want. Anyway, that's that. So let's have a look at this. So we asked about 120 firms, right? So this isn't the big survey that we've been sharing the last couple of weeks. About 120 firms about sources of new business, and we got it at firm level and individual level, consolidating stuff up. And I bet you would have guessed anyway, but look at that, getting towards 2/3 of new business coming in from existing client referrals. Be interesting to know, maybe those of you that are advisors in the sidebar, be interesting to know how many of you are still getting referrals or asking for referrals at the present time. And then if we look at the kind of other sources of business along the bottom, they're all bumping along. The only one that kind of groans its way, cleaving close to 20%, is other corporate partnerships, so introducer relationships with accountants and so on. And this is kind of the perennial thing about this sector, is it works on interpersonal relationships. What evidence is there that marketing, paid search, going out through LinkedIn and Facebook and doing all these kind of things to try and generate new business, is there any evidence that this stuff genuinely works? Why don't firms do it? What is the need for them to do it? What somebody pointed out to me recently again, that even if there are impacts on new business, most advisor firms don't depend on constantly signing up new business anymore in order to have a successful business. They can largely work with the dynamics of the book that they've got. And I'm just looking at the chat here. And Peter saying digital client services in London were starting before C19. I don't doubt that's true, Peter. Absolutely don't doubt that's true. But I think starting is probably the operative word in there. Paid for referrals is kind of interesting. I know guys like Phil Bray done a lot of work with, and John Pittam, some of those kind of guys as well, looking at vouch for and all that kind of stuff, and whether that works for people. Again, very, very, very small sources of new business. And I just wonder openly whether that's going to change as we come out the other side of this, or whether referrals will remain the absolute core of what's going on. So if we are dependent on what is a very traditional channel, we're not using all the kind of Ponzi marketing stuff that you can do, and there's many Ponzi marketeers that will tell you how to do Ponzi marketing things, and I might even be one of those sometimes. What are the constraints of kind of going out and getting more new business? So we asked that as well. And the green bars here are the highest ranking. So 1 is ranked highest, and 5 as being the least important, and 5 is the as the most important, sorry, and 5 is the least important. That's really not as difficult as I just made it sound. And so the kind of biggest answers of the constraints on finding clients, the inefficiency of products and providers, and I'm not sure, I don't know, is that a kind of general kvetch? That's just a general moan. I'm not sure that many firms genuinely can't sign up a new client because of the systemic inefficiency of the sector. The systemic inefficiency of the sector needs worked on, and we've covered quite a lot on that in the last few weeks. And I'm not pretending that everything's rosy or anything, but I'm not sure it absolutely gets in the way of client acquisition. But who knows, you might feel that I'm talking total mince there. Finding the right clients, I think, is a fascinating response, right? It's a really big bar, and if you take the two of them together, well over half of respondents saying that finding clients that they want to do business with is the main challenge. And here's Michelle. Hi, Michelle. It's nice to see you on the call. The problem with referrals is that for vast swathes of the community where accessing financial advice is not the norm, are kept out of the club, and that's got to be true, right? So we've got advice gap issues all over the place here. Somebody mentioned the digital echo chamber. That was Sarah and John a moment ago, but it's kind of like that, right? It's a kind of referential, self-perpetuating sector then. What is the right client? And there's an interesting discussion to have probably about what the lifetime value of clients is. Now, we don't have anyone from NextGen or anything on, I don't think, but if they were, they might be saying, well, look, it can't just be about the AUA of that client on day one. I'm sorry if you can't see the left-hand bit of the x-axis, which is hidden behind me and Chris. I'm not quite sure how to sort that out, actually. But if you can't see it, it says inefficiency of products and providers, and kind of heads up from there. Look, I never pretended to be good at this, right? It is what it is. So there we are. Things that don't tend to constrain firms, or that they say are less important, close to capacity and my firm's appetite for growth. And that's kind of interesting, because I do hear from lots of firms that we talk to, listen, we're not new business hounds. That was back in the pre-RDR days, where we'd get them on and then need to look for the next bit of initial commission or whatever. So this kind of portfolio management thing, according to this survey at least, which was only 120 firms, but doesn't constrain things so much. And Matthew suggests that for far too many, the right client is where decent trail or ongoing fees can be earned. And there's the tension, right? There's absolutely the tension. You've got to be commercial, you've got to run a business, but who are we freezing out of the industry? And are there other models that might be able to make things a little bit smoother? At least some of that, he says, pivoting quite brilliantly to the next section, will be down to digital channels and trying to make sure that things can run a little bit more smoothly. Looking at the bits over on the right-hand side here of my screen, Ian saying onboarding a client does take far longer than it should. Getting correct full info on existing assets takes so long or too long. And that's right, man. It's absolutely the case. And if you've tried to lever existing asset information out of legacy life codes and all that kind of stuff, or closed book shops particularly, that's pretty brutal. And Greg Peacock just shouts compliance. I don't know if that's just the sort of thing he shouts in a kind of Shawshank Redemption kind of style from day to day. It might be Greg, I'm not sure. So what I'm going to do is defocus my screen here. Whoop. And though I've temporarily lost me thing, here we are. So I'm going to unfocus the screen and come back to there we are. Right, so I'm introducing now Chris Fisher, who's Chief Executive of Multrees. Hello, Chris.
Hello, Mark. How you doing?
That's all right. I'm doing all right. So Multrees is a platform, and you work with advisors and all that kind of stuff, but it's not where you're kind of best known from. So I imagine there's some people in the chat probably don't know Multrees. So can you give us just a minute on you guys, and then we'll get into the topics and why I've got you on.
Okay, yeah. Well, I mean, it is just a platform, and we support advisor businesses, and primarily support the investment proposition they run for their clients. We've been around for about 10 years. We really started off as a child of the last financial crisis when some sort of West End of London sort of multi-family office businesses were kind of getting kicked out of the door of various banks and looking for an independent platform to set up their business and their clients on, and that's where we came into play.
Okay, and since doing that, obviously multifamily office started, but you've moved across into wealth managers and now kind of getting more into the IFA side of things. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. Although I personally don't make too much of a distinction between those groups. Really the way I look at it is, and having been an advisor once myself, is there's kind of financial planning, there's tax structuring, and then there's investment proposition and implementation of that, and that's kind of common across all those sectors. Who does it in each sector and how much is outsourced varies slightly. So I've probably got a few observations on that, but otherwise what we've seen in the last few years is more sort of, I guess you might term them retail businesses have taken up our services. There's no real difference for us whether the business is managing money for ultra high net worth families and individuals, or for folks with a few $100,000 to invest.
All right, that's good. One of the main reasons that I wanted to get you on is you hit the headlines a couple of weeks ago, a few weeks ago, in terms of having removed the need for paper wet signatures completely. So I think you just don't take them in pretty much anything that you need. If there might be third-party things that people do where, I don't know, a bond provider or something somewhere might want something. Is that the case?
Yes, that's the case, but really, it's really quite careful to understand that we came from sort of an easier starting spot, in that our sort of original core client firms, if you like, were very keen on owning the whole client journey, the whole client relationship, from the planning, the structuring through the investment component. So we very much sit in the background of that. So we really had much less requirement for end client paperwork signatures in the first place. So reasonably easier for us to move to sort of a full digital signature capability.
All right, I'll definitely come back to that, because there's a thing in here, right? I was getting into it the other day on talking about digital signatures particularly, right? And the FCA put out another reminder yesterday that digital signatures are sort of all right and all that kind of thing. You guys are DocuSign users, I think. It's almost like we prepared this, right? But yeah, you signed up with DocuSign, and that's in your processes. Is that right?
That's in our processes. I mean, it really started in our back-end processes with opening up accounts at transfer agents, bank signatures, that kind of stuff. That's really where we developed it from, and then flipping that over into sort of customer-side signatures for things like ISA applications became a reasonably sort of easy. I'll probably get my ops team shouting at me now, but a reasonably easy sort of transition to get the customer-side electronic signatures working.
Yeah, because we've seen quite a lot of providers saying, well, okay, you can use DigiSigs and just send us a copy, but it's not kind of baked in. They're not. They're kind of looking at it and saying, oh, okay, as opposed to doing the kind of platform side implementation of that. And Gary Hale, well-known troublemaker, asks, from your experience, Chris, why are platforms finding it so hard to update and implement digital signatures in these online ways of working? Obviously, it's come as a bit easier for you, but can you speak to why you think some people find it hard?
It has been a bit easier for us. I'll just emphasize that point again, and I've got great sympathy for my sort of fellow sort of platform operators who've had, some of them have had some challenges in transitioning. It just the real simple answer is it comes from that. Where do you sit as a platform? Are you supporting the firm and helping them to promote their brand to the customer and help them own the whole customer journey, or are you just being referred their customers, and therefore all of their customers are technically your customers? And that's kind of retail platform world, I think. That makes sense. So there's a lot more signatures involved. Then there's call centers involved. We've never really had that. We've just really been nice, quiet, sitting in the background, not seen and not really heard, and helping to support the advisor firms with their proposition.
So this is like where one finishes and the other starts, right? So in your kind of world, is it right to say then that the firms take more of the kind of burden of this stuff on themselves?
Yeah, they would definitely control more of the conversations with the end clients, yes, and take ownership and responsibility for all of those conversations. Don't refer them away to third-party product or service providers such as us. So we have the individuals working at the firms we work for giving us a hard time getting answers and queries out of us, but not the customers directly, if that makes sense.
Okay, and do firms, so if we talk about like retail business as opposed to, and that's only just to market out from the kind of ultra high net worth family office stuff, what do retail businesses need to do? Because it sounds to me like, I've been trying to get inside this a little bit, that I think lots of firms would love to say, listen, we'll just do a lot of this stuff so the provider doesn't need to do it. But that obviously comes with an overhead, I guess, right? And you need to be reasonably sure, because you've got fraud stuff to worry about and security stuff to worry about, because I imagine if things go wrong, you're the first one to get kicked anyway.
We're definitely one of the ones. So AML, KYC, client money responsibilities, etc. Also, we're in the go to jail seat for that, as any platform is. How you manage that with your client, with your advisor firm, how we do it is have a really strong trust-based relationship with that firm, where our compliance and our risk team can go in on a regular basis, spot check files, check processes, procedures for AML, KYC, and be really comfortable that an advisor firm is at any point following rigorous controls in the onboarding of new customers.
So for you then, I think this is a kind of interesting thing. We might need to expand on it another time, right? So this is about the processes and the strength of the controls and the environment stuff that's in the firm.
Yes, definitely. Early days for us as a business 10 years ago, we learned really quickly that working with good quality firms that take really seriously their responsibility in managing the onboarding of customers, particularly around the regulatory and compliance elements, was really, really important. And really good quality firms do that really well. When we were a young, business hungry entity, we took on some firms that we shouldn't have done because their processes and controls weren't as strong, and we eventually had to say goodbye to those because they were too high risk for us. So.
This kind of reminds me of the kind of discussions that happened in the early days of platforms, where they could do loads of things and it was great and all very exciting and stuff. And then some smart guy went, hang on, isn't all that's happening here that we're keying it instead of the life company or the product provider or whatever else? Haven't we just transferred a load of risk back into the IFA firm? But this is almost an evolution of that. Not in a bad way necessarily, but
it really is. If our risk team and our compliance team are helping the advisor firm to, get their standards and their processes working to a really high level of quality and a really strong level of efficiency, then we're helping them, they're helping us, and it's a partnership relationship, right? So
yeah. And so like a firm that's coming from that retail background, where perhaps they've relied on a retail platform, which is almost an evolution of a life office, almost the functions you would a little green man would recognize a lot of that, although we enjoyed the narrative, or I certainly did, of putting the boot into the old world and all that kind of stuff as platforms got going. Do those firms need to construct themselves differently, do you think? Do they need additional functions? Is there more that they need to do?
I don't think so. Our experience in the last few years of working with more retail businesses is if they have one strong process for that onboarding, that KYC, AML compliance, we can then, as the platform, take on and represent that to the transfer agents, the investment entities, the product providers, the trustees, the SIP trustees, the bond providers. And we can hand on heart represent that really well for them. So it just means there's one customer signature, one KYC AML verification process, and then the rest of it seems to work reasonably well. So I don't think it's a huge amount of reconstruction we've seen in any of the firms we've worked with.
That's interesting. One more question, and then we'll need to move on, but we can pick up more in the after party. I've seen it, from working with wealth managers and some firms, that they, in some of their platformy style relationships, or where they're using venues for certain things, they just require it to work the way they need it to work. So to integrate with the things that they use already and all that kind of stuff. Retail world has always felt a bit, you take what you get, and it might integrate or it might not, and there's going to be a dev queue and all the frustrations that these comment boards fill up with every single time you talk about this stuff. Is that your experience as well? So someone like Multrees that's got a history of working with that end of the world, are you required then to do those sorts of things? Is that, do you get told, right, we need this bank and that custodian or whatever else, could you just do that for us, please?
Yeah. Again, it's common across the spectrum of these types of firms, whether retail at one end to ultra high net worth at the other. It's very common that there are retained systems, back office systems, or or CRM systems are probably the main one we come across these days, where integration into the advisor's back office system is no different to when we were being asked to integrate to a high net worth manager's portfolio management system back in the day, right? So these are integration jobs for us, and configuring our platform to suit the business model of the firm we are working for became one of the most important things we had to focus on. That hasn't changed as we've evolved more into servicing retail advisory businesses.
Okay, brilliant. That's amazing. Thank you very much for coming on and doing that. I'm really conscious of time. We said we'd do the half hour, and we will. So the main kind of agenda finishes here. I'm just gonna finish up with this. So I owe you a joke, and here's the joke for this week. As I say, it's got arithmetic in it, which makes it amazing, though no animals. And a bloke walks into a bar, and I guess it was probably one of your fancy bars in London or something, and says to the barman, "I'll have a pint of beer, please. I'll have a pint of heavy." We'll pretend he was Scottish, and I just couldn't resist a Corona picture. And the barman says, "No problem, sir. That'll be £5." And the guy looks at him and says, £5? But the barman says, "Yeah, it'll be £5." And they stand quietly for a moment. And then the guy reaches into his pocket as the barman's pulling the pint, and he gets £5 consisting of 10p pieces, of 50 10p pieces, and he chucks them onto the bar and they scatter everywhere. And the barman looks at him and he looks at the barman, and there's a moment. The barman says, "All right," and hands him the pint. He drinks the pint and then he goes out. He comes back the next day and the barman's on again, and they look at each other, and exactly the same thing happens. And the barman's holding himself back because he's been told that he's really, really not meant to punch the punters as long as they do actually pay for the drink. So the 10p's get scattered on the bar once again, and the guy has his pint, and out he goes. Third day, exactly the same thing. And at this point, the barman's fit to burst, right? He's fit to burst, but he needs the job, and he's been done before for punching clients, and he can't be doing that again. So again, the £5 and 10p's get scattered across the bar and the floor, and he has to pick it up and put it in the till, and then just gives the guy the death stare to end all death stares. Day 4 arrives. Chap walks into the bar and says, "I'll have a pint, please." And the barman's like, "Are you serious?" And the guy says, "Aye." And I tell you what, there you go. And he chucks him a £10 note and says, "There you are." And the barman says, "Right," pulls the pint, and then goes to the till, puts the £10 away, gets out a big handful of 10p pieces, £5 change in 10p pieces, and throws it at the guy and says, "There you are, there's your change. What are you going to do now?" The guy looks down at the change and says, "I'll have another pint, please." And that's my joke for this week. I like that joke. I suspect you don't, but that's, it's my webinar, not yours. Listen, as every week, I always punt. If we are able to help anybody else, I would love you to put your hand in your pocket and help our house charity, which is the Samaritans, who are doing very difficult work at the moment. It's not all fun for everybody. I'm sure you're bored of hearing it, but the demand for their services is absolutely off the charts. And when you think about what that really means, the situations that people are in, that ain't nothing. So if you've got a couple of quid spare, and we're lucky in this industry, I think that we sometimes do, then I'd absolutely love you to chuck that at Samaritans. We will see you next week at 12:30. There will be no after party next week. We're making way for the How-Wow, the Paraplanners How-Wow, which will be at 1 o'clock. So we will just do half an hour next week. That's it from us. Thank you very much to Chris. Thank you for everyone to coming on. I'll shut up for a moment now, and then those of you that hang around, we'll start having a look at the comments and see if there's anything more that we can chat about. All the best, everybody. Have a good day. All right. So various people aren't too impressed with the joke, and the giraffe joke was a classic, actually, and I saw it in the Guardian not long after someone had the "you can't leave that line" there line. And can we have a replay of the giraffe joke? Do you know what, if we have to do many more weeks of this, I might actually have to repeat some of the jokes because I'm going to run out.
Okay, I can remind me to tell you afterwards the one about the piece of motorway that walks into the pub. I'll give it to you for next week.
Oh, do it now. No, do it now. Do it now. While the comments fill up.
I have to think about how to take all the expletives out of it first.
Do you know, with this audience, I'm not sure that you do, Chris. I'm not sure that you do. Well, listen, while people are having a wee think, so I've done a bit of stuff before on like the gaps between the wealth management industry, which I perceive to be really hot, for a given value of hot on managing money, but not necessarily that hot in financial planning. The IFA sector, that's really hot on financial planning, but perhaps not quite as into the investment management side a lot of the time. What, from sitting where you sit, where you see a lot of, across the piece, it's quite unusual, right? People tend to be focused into one of these channels or the other. What do you see about the, how money gets managed and how much kind of effort gets put into the construction of investment solutions per client?
That's a question for me. Right?
That was a question for you, yeah. They're all for you, really.
I'm still thinking about it.
You're still thinking about motorway junctions.
Definitely with the I would say with the businesses that manage sort of higher than average value portfolios, so in the multi-millions, you definitely our experience, our observation is there is more sort of internal investment resource on sort of research, asset allocation. There's definitely more of a focus on sort of true multi-asset class, multi-currency investing. So not just buying a range of funds, but also direct investments and actually investing globally and using currency as a diversification tool as well. So there's more complexity in the investment proposition. It's probably driven, again, observation, it's driven by the sort of the relative experience of the clients they are servicing, those clients who can pay more for advisors, get more advice on more components of the overall offering. So it tends to sort of drive slightly more complexity there. Definitely in recent years, as we've sort of experienced working with more firms in the servicing the retail sector, it's definitely a more sort of vanilla sort of investment approach, and there tends to be less people involved at the firms, and it tends to be mostly sort of fund-based investment propositions. But effectively, it's the same, asset allocation, diversification, uncorrelated assets, all that kind of stuff. It's kind of the same overall hypotheses, investment hypotheses being followed, I would say.
So we've got the guys. I've got a couple of kind of interesting things in here. So there's, I think this is a really good point. I've lost it now. Hang on. Somebody was saying how much of a retail platform actually gets used by firms. It makes me think the thing about Microsoft Excel, people only use 10% of it. And then people only use about 10% of their brains as well, I think. Although in my case, just to do this, it's running at about 85% load with 15% thinking about thrash metal. But yeah, here we go. Paul Miles said, how much of a retail platform is used by a firm? Is it like 20%? And I suppose I'm kind of interested in how the platform market starts to break apart a little bit, right? So we got all these new providers who did a brilliant job disrupting what was built, but they kind of built a sort of something that's ripe to be disrupted in its own turn now. So you talked about integration, but is that the way that you kind of have to work? That firms will say, well, we want that bit, but we don't want that bit.
No, I think a clever, mature firm will say, I want to have the most efficient process for managing my clients' expectations, and I want sort of the least moving parts, the highest level of scalability I can. So I don't want to be, the classic is rekeying something, twice in two different systems, right?
Yeah.
So that's why you get a sort of a high demand for integration. I don't think that changes across the spectrum of ultra through to retail. I think, clever sort of growth orientated firms, well-managed firms will want a high degree of scalability and high degree of efficiency, and that drives the demand on firms like Multrees to provide that integration capability, so that there's only, data is only keyed once and then it's kind of done, right? So you get that straight through processing capability.
Yeah, okay. John from Premium, actually, you're one of your peers over from down the road, says their kind of approach is like not to try and enforce a house process on people, but to let them kind of drive the. And that sounds a bit like what you're doing there as well, right?
I absolutely agree. That is the way. That is absolutely the way to do it. Look, these advisor businesses are out there. They've developed a proposition. They're being successful. They've got a business model they're operating to. The worst thing in the world they can do is go onto a one-size-fits-all kind of boxy, service provider that can't cater for the nuances of their operating model. So the ability to configure, which is I think what John's saying there, the ability to configure your platform to suit the operating model of the advisor firm you're working for is really key. And I really strongly agree with that message from.
And that's that is different to the main retail kind of thing, right? I mean, I'm not sure that, typically the big platforms owned, the top three, the mutuals and the standards and all that kind of stuff. That, challenging, I think, if you're dealing with thousands of firms, to build something that looks like each individual firm. Chris kind of carries that on, not you, another Chris, says, why should an investor pay for all the bells and whistles, a lot of which are bells and whistles for the firm, not the investor? And advisors charge what they charge. But that's kind of interesting. So let's talk about this as in the kind of practical things. So I know if I'm an advisor firm and I stick a client with £1 million onto XYZ platform, I know that I can avail myself of the full range of facilities that platform offers. If I choose not to use them, cost is the same to the client anyway, right? It doesn't really matter. In your model, then, presumably the cost that clients bear has a direct relationship to how much stuff the firm uses of yours. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely correct. I mean, that's kind of why, as you know, Mark, we've struggled to put a price up on your own sort of
Yes,
yes,
that's true. That's true.
Because frankly, the challenge is, an advisor firm approaches us and says, we want to use you for this, that changes the commercial dynamics for us. How wide is the service, proposition they want from us? How complex is it? How many moving parts are there? How many interactions are? That all drives a commercial discussion where you arrive at a price that is right for the advisor firm and that is right for us. So, it comes down to the operating model of the advisor firms. It comes down to how they want to run their proposition and represent that to their clients. That's really it.
Okay, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to say, Paul says I'd be interested to hear Chris's view on pricing structures of platforms. So he mentions, lots of guys still charging 30 bips plus. Is that sustainable, and do you see more consolidation in this sector?
Well, to kind of go back to my previous point, I think I don't know what value the platform charging 30 basis points. I don't know what value the end consumer is getting for that, so it's hard for me to comment. Definitely, the world where we've come from, the pricing dynamics are a lot tighter than that. So we and I'm sure others in our space are used to living on a lot less than 30 basis points for the services we provide to the firms we work for. But again, it's what's the end consumer getting out of it, and is that helping to deliver for them a really good outcome, if you want to use that kind of term.
Yeah,
that's not for me to do. We are, and I know others in our space are come from a different place in terms of commercial arrangements.
Yeah. And I think, giving Chris a break for a minute, this is, I've looked at this stuff before with a few different providers, and there is, although the dynamics are the same, the constituent elements, there is this kind of perimeter thing about what does the firm do and what does the platform do. And I think if you're going to use, I think, Chris, you call them kind of private label kind of arrangements. And I don't think, I said I'd give you a break and I'm asking you something already, but I don't think what you do is say that the advisor is the platform operator. You're still that.
No, we're the platform. It kind of breaks, the way I usually try and explain it, breaks down into there's a client money custody component, right? That's the core custody and trading component. There's an administration layer, which the output of that administration layer is the client reporting, the valuations, the tax packs at the end of the year, etc., and how those look, feel, and are designed for each advisor firm is pretty important. And then the third component is the provision of technology tools. Does the advisor want to invest in their own technology, or do they want to use technology that we provide to them? Okay, so you start to break down those components, and you can really, so you make your own model effectively. You make your own operating model from the platform that you want to work with, and that affects the that affects the commercials again. I mean, it's
yeah, and I think what that probably does is makes then like that has to be the way that firm does business, right? It probably isn't the case that if you've got five five RIs in your business, and one of them quite likes this, and another one quite likes Transact, and another one quite likes something else or whatever else because they've grown up with that, or whatever good reasons that there might be for that. That probably doesn't work. So it becomes much more kind of grooved, one way of doing things, kind of industrialized process.
In our experience, good quality, well-managed advisor businesses have a proposition which caters for the client base they want to target. But that proposition is common across their advisors. The firm that has 20 advisors each doing their own different thing, that's difficult for a firm like us to cope with, I would say. That's where we would kind of say, sorry, not for us.
Yeah, and there's definitely, it's not just in platforms. I think there's loads of stuff where you see advisor firms, we see it in the research stuff, that firms really value optionality and freedom, and they don't want to be locked into one way of doing things, which is a very understandable and quite a kind of entrepreneurial kind of mentality, maybe a small business mentality. I probably have that too. But there's an inflection point at which stuff has to fall away, and if you want to scale, if you want to grow, if you want to drive, then things have to run on rails.
Yeah. And there's an exception to that though, and it is you do have to let advisors be able to choose the products and services that are right for their clients. So I think it is really, really important. However your operating model works as an advisor, that you retain that open architecture sort of whole of market access, that you don't give that away. You don't tie yourself into, just one set of, product providers. You have to retain that flexibility.
No, that's right. And it's a balance, isn't it? Because you may have one kind of central thing, but you're right, there have to be exceptions for client that's genuinely not suitable. Tim, we'll probably come to the end of our time very soon, but Tim Gray says you can't scale without committing to something, and that sounds about right to me. You're going to make a decision at some point. Our very own Mike, this is I don't know if Mike just what drives this, but how much does the end client get to see of the name or the brand Multrees, and assuming very little, does this mean the advice firm needs to invest in developing their own brand more? So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I would kind of flip that around and say we're really interested in working with advisor firms that really want to have their own strong brand and want to promote that and own the whole customer journey and customer proposition. Those are the kind of firms that we work well with.
Yeah.
We're not for everyone. I mean, let's be fair. No provider can be all things to all men, and we're not. But firms that have a strategy, have a vision, and want to grow a brand, that's good for us to work with.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I'll finish up with Paul's been a brilliant contributor to this, but I think you're right, Paul. It seems to be getting to this stage that, I'll try and put it in my words, RDR was meant to put the firm, the advisor firm, right at the heart, right? The power shifted away from the provider to the firm. And that's taken a lot longer to kind of move through. But if the firm and its daily processes are absolutely at the heart, like really genuinely at the heart, then probably the operations of that firm, most of which happen inside a back office or a CRM or something, that has to be at the heart. And then that everything is a satellite to that, and then a Multrees, for example, being asked to, or a Premium or whoever being asked to integrate in isn't anything to worry about. That's just the way things have to be.
That's absolutely right. And just to be really clear, we are not a CRM provider, and we will never be in that space. But that is the center of that operating model that I'm talking about. The CRM component, the way the advisor runs their client-side processes, etc. That is really, really key. Everything else should hang off of that, including ourselves and any other product provider, service provider out there.
So it feels like I probably need to get a CRM provider on here at some point, and talked about their view of that. I imagine they would agree they should be the centre of the world. That's kind of unlike. I think I should be the centre of the world.
Well, no, the advisor is the centre of the world. They have a nice CRM tool to work with, I think.
There you go. There you go. Listen, we'll call it there. Thank you so much, everyone. 77 people stayed on for the extra bit there, which only goes to show that either people don't know how to shut this stuff down, or that your sandwiches are far too big and taking you too long to eat. Chris, that was brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for being on, and we'll call it there. See you next week.
Thank you, guys.